Like I remember for me the time when I felt so convicted, like I've actually never really surrendered my dreams, my plan, my will. I never really have done that. And I felt this conviction one day when God opened up my eyes to his love, when I was tangibly encountering his spirit, and I felt moved. I surrendered it all. I surrendered my dreams, my plan, my will. And I know the date that was. I know the day that was. I remember it vividly, the day I actually, from my heart, surrendered those things. And I really meant it. It was honest. And so like 9 months later, when I received the prophecy over my life, it had already taken place, that surrender. So then when God's asking me to do something I don't want to do, it was like, oh yeah, I have to do that. I surrendered to God. I made that decision. For me, it wasn't like when this prophecy came, I was like, okay, I have a decision to make. For me, I had already truthfully surrendered to God. It's like I had this conversation with him, covenant, like, whatever you want to do, Lord, if you want to take me a different direction, if you want to remove my dreams and replace them with yours, you can do that, Lord. So I really meant that. And so I was like ready for it. And so when it came, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm surrendered. So take that first step of really surrendering those things, like every part, every part. And maybe as time goes on, God reveals other things like you haven't actually surrendered this, maybe timeline of things, of desires of your heart. And so there's always more and more things that as time goes on that you'll realize, oh, I haven't actually surrendered everything yet. There's this too. And so I surrender this to you, Lord. When you first make the intention, when you first make that covenant, you have that conversation with God to surrender everything. Then it will be tested. Then it will be tested. So like for me, the prophecy came. So this was like a test. For me, it wasn't like, will you surrender more right now? It was really like, I already decided to surrender more. And so now's the test. Like, will I follow through with the choice that I made, with the covenant that I made? How do you know if you surrendered everything? Well, first of all, have you made that real honest covenant, that real honest conversation with God where you were honest and where you really meant it? Like if he wanted to literally replace dreams that you have with his, will you say yes? If he wants to move you to a different place in the world, will you say yes? If you have to give up things, sacrifice things, will you do that? If you have to go through a refining fire and really pay a price to be who God is calling you to be, and it's really uncomfortable, the most uncomfortable thing you've ever gone through, will you do that? Will you do that willingly, peacefully, without complaining and fighting God? You know, will you do that? So number one, it's like, is that the intention of your heart? Is that the covenant that you've actually made with God? So that's the first part. And then the second part of that is the testing. So then there will be certain times where the action of surrender comes up. Okay, now it's time to actually sacrifice, pay the price, go through a refining fire, change directions, put your dream aside for God's dream. Will you stay in line with what you made a covenant with God about? Will you follow through with the action? When those testing times will come, you'll know. And by the way, that's a great intimacy time with God, is the testing times that I've found. When I have to make a choice to guard my heart, when I have to make a choice to keep my peace and keep my eyes focused on God and not get upset when attacks come my way, when persecution comes my way, when I have to really make an action, like take action, like really make a choice, when I have to make the choice to hold my tongue, in that place of, you know, making that choice to do the uncomfortable, do what God is asking, I sense God's delight, that he's proud. I sense that it's precious. It's like a deeper kind of intimacy than on other days, you know, because it's a very significant choice of surrender, choice to be after God's heart in a deeper way when it's not easy. There will be those moments where you make that choice to obey God. And in that moment, you should renew your mind to hear God's voice, saying, I'm proud of you for choosing me. I see that you've made this choice. So it's important, you hear God saying he's proud of you in those times. I don't mean hearing the audible voice. And I always make sure I clarify that. So much of hearing God's voice is just renewing your mind to that truth. Like whenever you obey God, God sees it and he is proud of you. His heart is touched. He's saying, well done, my good and faithful son, daughter. So it's important you renew your mind to that truth, that he is speaking that, to be aware of that. But then that's a time where you're going to have that rest and confidence knowing I'm surrendered. So it's like when these tests come up and you make that choice to obey God, you'll know you're in that place of surrender. If a different testing comes up and, you fear man over God, you choose a prideful action than the humble way, you choose your selfish ambition over what God is asking you to do, that he's been speaking to you, maybe that he's speaking through your spiritual parent. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know that you're being disobedient. And so you're not living in surrender at that time. So it's quite simple. It's not complicated, really, to know if you're living surrendered to God. It's important to not be religious about it, feeling like you're messing up all the time when maybe you're not even messing up. Sometimes people can be so hard on themselves, think that God has unrealistic expectations over them. Maybe they beat themselves up because they didn't read for a whole hour in the Bible that day or something, when they had made that plan and they said, Lord, I'm going to read 1 hour of the Bible every single day. And maybe they think God told them to do that, but maybe God didn't tell them to do that. Maybe that was a spirit of religion speaking. And so then one day they don't read a whole hour, they read a little less than that. And then they can think, oh, I've messed up. Oh, I've disobeyed God. When no, you didn't actually. God wasn't asking you to do something religious, and he wasn't asking you to do something that's too high of a standard, that you couldn't meet type thing. That's why I'm sharing, to know if you're living surrendered isn't really complicated. God looks at the heart.